Hisashi Ouchi holds the unfortunate record for receiving the highest dose of radiation ever survived, at least temporarily. On September 30th, 1999, at the Tokaimura nuclear facility in Japan, Ouchi was helping mix uranium fuel when things went catastrophically wrong. A criticality accident occurred, blasting him with 17 sieverts of radiation. To put that in perspective, 5 sieverts will kill you. He got more than 3 times that amount. The radiation hit him so hard that his chromosomes were completely destroyed. His DNA was so damaged that his cells couldn't reproduce anymore. Within hours, his skin started turning red and blistering. Within days, it started falling off in sheets. That's the sound of your skin cells dying en masse. Ouchi's body began breaking down from the inside out. His white blood cell count dropped to 0, meaning he had no immune system. His intestinal lining disintegrated, causing massive internal bleeding. But here's the truly horrific part. Doctors kept him alive for 83 days. They gave him multiple blood transfusions, skin grafts, and stem cell treatments, but his body couldn't regenerate tissue anymore. The skin grafts wouldn't take. His organs were failing one by one. He begged the doctors to let him die, reportedly saying, "I can't take it anymore. I am not a guinea pig." His heart stopped multiple times, and each time they resuscitated him. By the end, he'd lost most of his skin, his face was unrecognizable, and his internal organs were liquefied mush. When he finally died on December 21st, 1999, it was probably a mercy. Ouchi's death wasn't just tragic, it was torture. 83 days of unimaginable suffering because medical ethics required them to try everything possible to save him, even when it was clear there was no hope. Radiation doesn't just kill you, it destroys you slowly, piece by piece. Louis Slotin was a physicist working on the Manhattan Project at Los Alamos in 1946. His job involved conducting criticality experiments with plutonium cores, bringing radioactive material right to the edge of going critical. This incredibly dangerous work was nicknamed Tickling the Dragon's Tail. On May 21st, 1946, Slotin was demonstrating the procedure using a plutonium core that would later be called the Demon Core because it had already killed one person. He was using 2 beryllium-coated hemispheres to reflect neutrons back into the plutonium. The only thing keeping them apart was a screwdriver he was holding. His hand slipped. The screwdriver slipped out, the hemispheres closed, and the plutonium went critical. A burst of deadly radiation flooded the room instantly. Slotin immediately saw a blue glow and felt a sour taste in his mouth. That blue flash lasted less than a second, but it was enough to doom him. Slotin received a dose estimated at 2,100 rads of radiation, far beyond lethal. He quickly pulled the hemispheres apart with his bare hands, stopping the reaction and probably saving the other scientists in the room. But he just signed his own death warrant. Within minutes, his hands started swelling. Within hours, he was vomiting uncontrollably. His skin began to blister and peel. Over the next 9 days, his condition deteriorated rapidly. His organs began to fail, and his body literally rotted from the inside out while he was still conscious. He spent his final days in absolute agony, fully aware of what was happening because he understood exactly how radiation was destroying his body. He documented his own symptoms for medical science right up until he couldn't speak anymore. On May 30th, 1946, 9 days after the accident, Louis Slotin died from acute radiation poisoning. The Demon Core would claim one more victim before being melted down. Slotin's death stands out because he knew immediately that he was dead. He just had to wait over a week for his body to catch up. Cecil Kelly was a chemical operator at Los Alamos in New Mexico. On December 30th, 1958, he was working with a large mixing tank that was supposed to contain a diluted plutonium solution. Due to a series of mistakes, the tank actually contained a highly concentrated plutonium solution. When Kelly turned on the stirrer, the plutonium went critical instantly, creating a massive burst of radiation and a bright flash. Kelly was standing directly next to the tank. He received an estimated dose of 3,900 to 4,900 rads in less than 1 second. He immediately collapsed, went into shock, and started having seizures. Coworkers found him unconscious on the floor, his skin already turning red and swelling. They rushed him to the hospital, where doctors worked frantically, knowing it was hopeless. The radiation had completely destroyed his central nervous system and bone marrow. Over the next 35 hours, Kelly drifted in and out of consciousness, experiencing seizures, respiratory failure, and cardiovascular collapse. His body swelled up grotesquely as his cells died and released fluid into his tissues. His blood pressure swung wildly between dangerously low and dangerously high. Unlike Ouchi, who suffered for 83 days, Kelly died quickly, just 35 hours after exposure. But those 35 hours were pure hell. His body was shutting down system by system, and there was nothing anyone could do. He died on January 1st, 1959, the first casualty of the new year. What makes Kelly's death particularly tragic is that it was completely preventable. Multiple safety protocols were ignored, leading to the concentration of plutonium in the tank. 1 second of exposure, 35 hours of suffering, and 1 preventable death. Before Louis Slotin got killed by the Demon Core, it claimed its first victim, Harry Daghlian, on August 21, 1945. Just days after the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan, Daghlian was working alone at Los Alamos, conducting criticality experiments with the same plutonium core. Daghlian was stacking tungsten carbide bricks around the core to reflect neutrons back into it. He was working alone, which violated safety protocols, but figured it would be quick. As he was placing another brick, he realized too late that this would push the core past critical. He tried to pull it away, but fumbled and dropped it directly onto the center of the assembly. The plutonium went supercritical instantly. Blue light filled the room. Daghlian frantically knocked the brick off with his hand, receiving a massive dose of radiation. The whole incident lasted maybe 3 seconds, but that was enough to kill him. He immediately felt tingling in his hand and a sour metallic taste. He knew instantly what had happened. As a physicist, he understood he just received a lethal dose and there was no coming back. He calmly left the lab, informed his supervisors, and checked himself into the hospital. Over the next 25 days, Daghlian's condition slowly deteriorated. His right hand swelled up grotesquely and turned dark purple, then black. The tissue was completely dead. His hand essentially rotted off while still attached to his body. The radiation destroyed his bone marrow. He developed gangrene, infections, and organ failure. Despite aggressive treatment, Daghlian died on September 15, 1945, less than a month after the accident. He was only 24 years old. His death led to stricter safety protocols at Los Alamos, but not strict enough to prevent Slotin from dying the same way less than a year later. When Reactor 4 at Chernobyl exploded on April 26, 1986, firefighters rushed to the scene without understanding what they were dealing with. They thought it was just a regular fire. They had no idea they were running straight into a cloud of deadly radioactive material. The first firefighters on the scene climbed onto the roof of Reactor 3 right next to the burning, exposed reactor core of Reactor 4 and started putting out fires. They were standing directly on top of chunks of graphite and nuclear fuel that had been blown out of the reactor, material so radioactive it could kill you in minutes. The radiation levels on that roof were estimated at 20,000 roentgens per hour. A lethal dose is about 500 roentgens total. These guys were getting lethal doses every couple of minutes, and they had no protective gear, no dosimeters, no idea what they were being exposed to. The firefighters worked for hours on that roof, breathing in radioactive dust, handling radioactive debris with their bare hands, and absorbing massive doses of radiation. By the time they were pulled off, it was already too late. Within hours, they started vomiting violently. Their skin turned red and started blistering. Over the next few days, they were evacuated to Moscow. Their conditions deteriorated rapidly. The radiation had destroyed their bone marrow, intestinal lining, and internal organs. They spent their final days in a special hospital ward, their bodies covered in radiation burns, their internal organs liquefying, blood seeping from every orifice. Most died within 2 weeks of the explosion. Their bodies were so radioactive, they had to be buried in lead-lined coffins encased in concrete. The Chernobyl firefighters are heroes who saved countless lives by preventing the fire from spreading to other reactors, but they paid the ultimate price. They walked into hell without knowing it, and they never came back out. Not all radiation deaths are quick. Albert Stevens holds the unfortunate record for the highest cumulative radiation dose ever documented, and he lived for 20 years after his exposure. In 1945, Stevens was a house painter who went to the hospital thinking he had stomach cancer. Without his knowledge or consent, doctors injected him with plutonium-239 as part of a secret government experiment to study the effects on the human body. Stevens didn't actually have cancer. The doctors misdiagnosed him, but they injected him with radioactive plutonium anyway and never told him. They just monitored him for the rest of his life, taking samples to study how the plutonium distributed through his body. For 20 years, Stevens walked around with radioactive plutonium coursing through his body, slowly irradiating him from the inside. The plutonium accumulated in his bones, liver, and other organs, giving off radiation constantly. He developed various health problems over the years, but never knew why. Stevens finally died in 1966, 2 decades after the injection. His body had absorbed an estimated 64 sieverts of radiation over those 20 years, far more than anyone else in recorded history. When his body was autopsied, his bones were so radioactive they couldn't be handled safely. What makes Stevens' case particularly horrifying isn't just that he was used as a human guinea pig without consent. It's that he lived for 20 years not knowing he'd been deliberately poisoned by the very doctors who were supposed to be treating him. He died slowly, over 2 decades, from radiation he never knew he'd been exposed to. And there you have it. The worst radiation deaths in history, from instant exposure that killed in hours to slow poisoning that took decades. Radiation is one of the most horrific ways to die. Your body literally breaks down at the cellular level, and modern medicine can do almost nothing to stop it. If you found this dark dive into history fascinating, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. Check out this next video where we explore even more twisted moments from the past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.